Look, I totally get it. 95% of you do not care if New York State's budget is late by a day or a couple weeks or whatever. It's we journalists who obsess about these things. You just want the state services you use when you want them, right? But the state budget and its lateness reveals some things about the people who run our state and the relationships between them. We try to tease out what the late state budget really means on today's story of the day.
Support for Story of the Day comes from Pearsall Wealth Management at UBS Wealth Management USA, subsidiary UBS AG, member FINRA SIPC, 1 Broad Street, Glens Falls.
Hey, I'm David Sommerstein. It's Thursday, April 2nd. I have to say, I'm glad April Fool's Day is over. I got tricked like 5 times yesterday. First up, the Erie County Medical Examiner in Buffalo has ruled the death of a Rohingya refugee was a homicide. Nurul Amin Shah Alam's body was found on a frigid, cold street last February, days after being dropped off by Border Patrol agents. Ryan Zunner of the New York Public News Network reports.
Health officials say Alam died on a cold downtown street in February of a ruptured ulcer, which developed from hypothermia and dehydration. The county's health commissioner notes the homicide definition includes negligence or inaction, not intent. The homicide ruling has hit Alam's Rohingya community in Buffalo hard. They are a stateless ethnic group who have faced atrocities in Myanmar for decades. Community organizer Imran Faisal says his people fled Southeast Asia to escape danger.
There must be accountability and the justice must be served to honor his life. This tragedy has created deep fear within our community. It feels for many of us like a return to a place where our lives did not matter.
The Erie County District Attorney says they are, quote, committed to seeking the truth and upholding justice. In Buffalo, Ryan Zunner for the New York Public News Network.
A longtime advocate for the St. Lawrence River has died. Catherine Wheeler has more.
John Peach joined Save the Rivers board in 2000. He served as its president before eventually becoming executive director. He led the Clayton-based environmental group for 6 years. Peach died on Monday in Clinton, New York at 76 years old after a battle with cancer. Jeff Garnsey, a past president of Save the River, credits Peach with turning the nonprofit into what it is today.
We're in a better financial place than Save the River as an organization has ever been. And if there is one face that you can hang the responsibility for that on, it's John Peach, because he lived and breathed Save the River.
Peach spent decades in the Thousand Islands stretch of the St. Lawrence River. According to the Watertown Daily Times, his parents purchased Manhattan Island in the 1950s. Peach told NCPR in 2023 that he loved to fish in the waterway.
I used to get in my little 10-foot aluminum boat with a 7.5 horsepower motor, and one of the things I loved to do the most was sneak away from my parents, have my fishing pole, and I would come to Blind Bay.
Years later, he and his wife Pat bought Huckleberry Island and summered there with their 2 children. Over the years, Peach advocated for water quality, wildlife protection, and habitat restoration. Garnsey says Peach cared for the St. Lawrence River like it was a family member. He says that love was contagious and inspired others and himself to be fiercely protective of it.
I hope that people have learned from him enough to have that moment of pause when they're going to do something that may cause harm. You know, spilling a little bit of gas out of your vent, it takes nothing to take a little bit of Dawn and sink it to the bottom. You know, I would hope that people would have that moment of pause where they start to take ownership because he did that.
Last year, Save the River named Peach its annual Friend of the River. In a video posted online, he said it was an honor to work with the community to protect the St. Lawrence. Garnsey says as he prepares for another season out on the river, it already feels a whole lot smaller without Peach there. Catherine Wheeler, North Country Public Radio.
The fishing pier at the Crown Point Campground in Essex County is temporarily closed due to structural damage to the roof. The State Department of Environmental Conservation says fishing and walking on the pier will not be allowed while the agency works with an engineer to fix it. The closure may last through the whole 2026 season. The remaining areas of the campground remain open for public use. The DEC will announce the reopening of the pier once it's deemed safe for the public. New York State's budget is once again late as the governor and legislature hash out disagreements over policy. Initiatives on the table include changing the state's climate law, pension reform, prison reform, and new taxes on the wealthy. Jimmy Vielkind of the New York Public News Network spoke with Jason Dole from our network partner Radio Catskill. He said negotiations between Governor Kathy Hochul and legislative leaders have a long way to go.
From what we understand from Senate Majority Leader Andrea Stewart-Cousins, who sort of briefed the public and the press about the update, about the status of talks this week, nothing major has been resolved. There have been some discussions on these contentious issues, but no real resolutions. I understand from people who are close to the talks that Governor Hochul is still kind of holding firm and hasn't given much ground in negotiations, which is frustrating to some of the lawmakers who are Democrats and control both the state assembly and the Senate. We even heard from Stewart-Cousins that there's been no talk about any of the money, any of the $263 billion and some amount of cents that are going to go for everything from funding healthcare to school aid to supporting the prison system and tens of thousands of state employees. So before these money talks can be done, which is, of course, the core of the budget, we understand that these policy proposals have to be resolved. And as of right now, there just hasn't been much progress made.
We're talking about months-long budget negotiations, and they haven't even talked about money yet, which is a key part of budget. But that, I guess you're really underlining a nuance of New York State's budgeting process. So they got to get the policies lined up before they really talk about dollars and cents.
Well, this has been Governor Hochul's strategy. None of this has to happen. In fact, in recent years and in the earlier days when I was covering the state capitol, there wasn't much policy in the budget. It really was a dollars and cents document, and lots of the debates and the fights had to do with where to put those dollars and those cents. But Governor Hochul, since taking office, feels that she has leverage in the budget process, and she has taken the core of her agenda each year and sort of woven it into the 10 bills that comprise the state budget. This year, that includes changes to the payout standards for car insurance, which Governor Hochul hopes will decrease the rates that New Yorkers are paying for auto insurance. It includes possible rollbacks to the 2019 CLCPA, the state's climate law, which Governor Hochul says she needs in order to prevent cost increases, though environmental groups and many Democratic legislators push back on that vociferously. It also includes smaller policy items like a decision or a proposal to put buffer zones around houses of worships and abortion clinics where protests would be restricted. So really, Hochul has not shown much of an inclination or any sense of urgency about getting this all done by the April 1 deadline. She also knows that state lawmakers don't get paychecks if the budget goes beyond April 1. She still does. And this year, in an election year for all 213 state legislators and the governor, she knows that many of those legislators are facing competitive party primaries, which will happen in June. She, after Lieutenant Governor Antonio Delgado dropped his challenge, does not have a primary opponent.
I would have assumed that the governor would be on the same page with those lawmakers of not wanting to have a protracted budget process in a re-election year, even though I understand she doesn't have to run in a primary, but still, she's going to be asking New Yorkers to re-elect her. I mean, how much longer can this drag on?
Well, I don't know the answer to how much longer it can drag on. Most people at the state capitol, including a guy named Jim Tedisco, who's served in the legislature since 1982, say it's probably going to be a matter of weeks and that these negotiations could possibly stretch into early May. The thing to remember is that while Hochul doesn't have a primary, she wants to be seen as fighting for these issues. She's looking toward November in a general election race against Republican Nassau County Executive Bruce Blakeman. And so for Hochul to have held up the budget, to held firm in order to do the things she says she's trying to do, which is lower costs for people, is something that she and her allies think they can spin to her political advantage and calculate that most normal New Yorkers don't know what the state budget deadline is and don't really care if the budget is a few weeks late.
That was Jimmy Vielkind, our expert in all things Albany with the New York Public News Network. He spoke with Radio Catskill's Jason Dole. We have more news all the time on our website, ncpr.org. Music today by the Currys of Potsdam and Dan Berggren of Ballston Spa. I'm David Summerstein, North Country Public Radio.